Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for our session, Moving Hearts and Minds with Data, with our special guest, Ronald Guymon, Senior Lecturer of Accountancy and R.C. Evans Data Analytics Scholar at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and Michael Elniski, Area Business Director at Itamar Medical. My name is Alexander. I'm a part of the higher education team here at Exec, and I'll be helping to moderate today's session. Before we begin, I have a few brief housekeeping items for our audience. First, all attendees are in listen-only mode. However, we encourage you to engage in the session by asking questions, which you can do using the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel. Please make sure to use this feature for all the questions you may have for the presenters, while we invite you to use the in-chat feature for sharing any thoughts you may have with the rest of the audience. We will be having a formal Q&A session, so please feel free to send in your questions throughout the session. Additionally, we are recording today's session, so you can look forward to receiving a copy of the recording via email in the coming days. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Kate Deering, Coordinator, Recruitment and Admissions for GEE's online programs at GEE's College of Business, the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Kate?
Thanks, Alexander, for that warm welcome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Ivy Exec webinar today. As Alexander said, my name is Kate Deering. I am a coordinator within the recruitment and admission space here at GEES. I look forward to spending the next hour or so with you. Since our presenters represent GEES College of Business and one of our degree programs, I wanted to give you just a brief overview of what GEES Business is all about. We offer 3 online master's degree programs, a Master's of Business Administration, a Master's in Accountancy, and a Master's of Science and Management, as well as 3 brand new graduate certificates that we just launched in Strategic Leadership and Management, Accounting, Data Analytics, and Digital Marketing. GEES graduate level programs they're innovative, they're affordable, and they're designed to be specifically online, just to offer a real flexibility and access for our full-time working professionals. Today, you will experience a conversation between one of our talented instructors and a current IMBA student and be able to just get a little bit of a glimpse into what kind of content and research is happening within GEES. Our courses balance foundational material shared on the Coursera platform with an interactive high engagement component from Illinois as well. That high engagement component includes a live class each week and many other facets to learning like group projects, office hours, networking, and also being part of a great university like Illinois. If you'd like to learn more, I'm going to add a QR code in my email in the chat in just a minute. I'm very excited for our fireside chat today, Moving Hearts and Minds with Data. In this session, Ron Guymon and Michael Elniski are going to have a great conversation. Numbers by themselves don't move hearts and minds. Consequently, encouraging data-driven decisions in organizations goes well beyond extracting insight from data. In our time today, Ron and Michael will discuss the importance of just telling some stories in tandem with presenting that data. They will share experiences, principles, and tips for using data to motivate improvement. Ron Guymon joined GEES in 2018 and is a senior lecturer at the GEES College of Business, where he focuses on teaching data analytics courses using Excel, Python, and R. Ron has worked as a data scientist for Numetric, a business intelligence company, and as the chief data officer for Gig, a social media influencing company. He continues to work on creating data analytics solutions for instructors, and he also focuses on communicating those solutions using interactive visualizations and dashboards. Ron earned a bachelor's and a master's degree in accounting from Brigham Young University and a PhD from the University of Iowa. And then we have Michael Elniski, who is a commercial leader with 20 plus years of experience leading commercial teams in the medical device industry. He has held several commercial leadership roles and has worked across the company spectrum from venture capital-based startups to global multinational companies. During his career, Michael won several awards for sales achievement, cross-functional leadership, and also innovation. In fact, in 2016, he received a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Edwards Life Sciences and served on the company-wide senior leadership team. Michael is known for his ability to organize chaos into a coherent commercial strategy and lead the execution through a hands-on approach. He's currently working full-time and is also a student in the IMBA program at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I'm so excited to turn this over to both Ron and Michael for a great conversation. Enjoy.
All right. Well, thank you, Kate and Alexander, for those introductions. It's great to be here. And I want to give you just a little bit more of a background between how Michael and I know each other. So I was teaching a data toolkit class. By the way, you can tell from my background, I'm a numbers guy. I really like numbers and analyzing data. Christmas for me is, and sometimes is just getting a new data set and I can explore it and analyze it. But I was teaching this class and Michael quickly stood out as a student who was really interested in learning about data analytics and tools for analyzing data and contributed a ton as well. And so as we worked through that class, I learned a lot from Michael. And I thought his background and his knowledge is just really unique. And anyway, we became friends, and we enjoy talking about numbers and applying data analytics. And really, it's more than just coming up with numbers. It's like how do you help drive decision and action and improvement in organizations? So, Michael. By the way, so we're going to have kind of just a question and answer back and forth with each other. And Michael, how about if I start with you and maybe just, will you tell us a little bit more about your current role, what you do at Itamar, and a little bit about your journey to arrive at that role?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Ron, great to see you. And thanks for the introductions. I don't know if I wrote that. I hope I live up to that. It sounded very impressive. But yeah, so I'm a commercial leader in medical devices. So basically, kind of honed my way through sales and then marketing, and really have been in the medical device space for 20 plus years. And then a few years ago, I decided to supplement my learning and looked around for an MBA program that was online that would line up with the demands of a commercial leader. So, I'm home with COVID because, I'm on an airplane all the time. So, yeah, so Geese really offered a fantastic tool. But I'm with a company called Itamar Medical. We were recently acquired by Zoll Medical. So it was a venture-backed startup, Israeli-based in the home sleep apnea marketplace. And so what was super interesting about this company for me was that it represented my first foray into digital health, right? And this idea of helping patients using digital tools. So yeah, so that's kind of how I got to where I am today.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, and I get, would you mind sharing a little bit about why this isn't going to be just like a whole long commercial for the IMBA program, but it is a great program. Would you mind sharing a little bit about why you enrolled in it? I think it's just awesome that you're working on an MBA while working full time.
Yeah, it's absolutely. So I think for me, there was some business skills that I think I was lacking some understanding. Some of the stuff, I think sales generally is a more of an artisan sort of career path where you sort of develop your skills along the way through experience and a lot of missteps as well. And so I think, as I've grown in organizations and gotten to places where I was managing teams and managing managers of teams, an MBA really made a ton of sense. But living on an airplane and kind of flying all over the place, and just the demands of that really made a residential type approach pretty difficult for me. And so I was looking for something that gave me, world-class faculty like yourself, a learning environment that worked with, sort of the demands of a professional that's out there. And then, again, and then lo and behold, I happened to be married with a child who just got to college, so I needed also to have some time to nurture those relationships too. And so for me, the IMBA was the perfect solution for all that.
Awesome, thanks. Well, That's helpful. So I want to make sure that the viewers kind of understand your situation where you're at. Now, in the IMBA program, we've got this focus on analytics, and I have training in accounting. That's clearly a numbers profession, right? That you're dealing with numbers all the time.
Right.
As sales, why a sales guy? I hope that's okay to call you a sales guy.
Sure.
Why? What value do you see in data? 'Cause I want to get to this point of moving hearts and minds with data, and I think this really kind of, maybe understanding why you're interested in data analytics as a sales guy is.
Yeah, for sure. So I think on a couple of reasons. One, as a mid-level or junior executive, and maybe some of the people that are on the webinar are probably in that career path. I think data skills are table stakes today. When I first started my career, I think data was sort of has grown over my career and become really important. And I think that as you're thinking about your next steps and where you're going to go, like finance and now data, and be able to talk about it, maneuver in it, and use it in decision making, are really the table stakes of business today. So for sure, was attractive to me, and one of the reasons I chose the program. And I think for me, being a commercial leader, we're one of the functions, like maybe an operations team that has daily numbers that everybody looks at, right? So numbers are kind of part of what we do, but we often really talk about influence and other things. And what I've come to know in my career is that really, if you peel back the data and you understand it, you can become a much better commercial leader and contribute to the organization better that way as well.
Awesome, thanks. And just from maybe an academic perspective, it's been like at least 12 years ago where I remember there started to be a lot of discussion. This is when iPhones were only a few years old. There was a lot of discussion about, hey, we really need to help students become more savvy with data. Even in accounting, where we focus on data a lot, it's like we need to do more with the data that we have. And so we've also, I think higher education has also adapted a lot. If you look over the last 12 years, where we're really, I think everywhere, we're implementing more data analytics and learning how to think about data and make decisions with it. So when you say, data analytics is table stakes, yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's really important that we have an idea of how to use data to make decisions. And then, you can, that's just the beginning of it. You can, how far into that process do you want to go?
Right.
Yeah. So, I think one of the things that we've talked about is, while knowing how to analyze data is important and really the focus of this presentation, coming up with specific numbers, whether it's forecasts or just any, you can use really cool algorithms, neural networks, extreme gradient boosting. You can throw out these terms and get numbers that may impress people just because you're using these numbers. But how does that transition in business to action? What have you seen? Any examples or?
Yeah, really good point. I think in the program, I think in one of the classes we talked about this concept of the hero's arc that's in literature, and this idea, and you see it in all the classics, whether it's Gilgamesh way back when, and all the way through to the Star Wars trilogies, and why these movies are successful, is they generally follow this sort of similar arc, right? And so somewhere along the way, maybe it was in Kevin Hartman's data class, around taking the data itself and turning it into a tool, right? All the learning of the whole program sort of connected with me. And so I think that's really important, is that the data is like a tool, and so I think of it sometimes like it's the lightsaber, right? Or it's the vibranium shield if you're a Marvel person, right? It's a tool, but it's in and of itself, when used in conjunction with other superpowers, and that's influence and sort of moving hearts and minds, right? The data becomes a really important part of moving people to a new place, right? And I think that's what I pulled out from the tool. And when I reflect back on times that I've been successful either with customers or getting my point across to an executive to get funding, it wasn't just that the regression worked, right? It was just like, so how does this translate, and how do I sort of empower other people to help them sort of make their decision, right? So I often think, you know, again, taking this thing maybe to an extreme, right, is that as a data analyst, you know, and again, that's a wide spectrum, you know, as a commercial leader, I feel like sometimes I'm a data analyst, and then certainly, you know, you're on another other end of the spectrum as a data scientist. It's really important that we take that tool and we become more like the Yoda, right, or the Gandalf, and then we're using data to help others, you know, with their journey, right? And I think that's where, you know, for me, the whole program sort of came together and related sort of what I do today to what I'm learning and how I'm pulling together. I don't know if that helps, but
Yeah.
I think about it.
Yeah, no, I love that idea of being the Gandalf or the Yoda. And I'm going to share my screen here. I just want to share a few principles that I think are really important from my experience in helping, well, in using data, not just to find cool insights, but to move hearts and minds, to lead to action.
Right.
And so I think there's, you know, a few things that we could say which are focus on why it's important. Sometimes people will see a number and they won't know. You may know that it's important if you've done the analysis with it, but they won't know why it's important. So you got to help them know why it's important. And then allow for discovery and make it memorable. And I want to just touch on allow for discovery for a minute. And as a teacher, I've come prepared with a few visuals here. So I just think, I don't know, for better or worse, but I want to share with you just a little picture here. These are a couple of my sons. And this idea of allowing for discovery, I think, goes hand in hand with the Yoda concept or Gandalf. So this is my 4-year-old and 1-year-old son, and you can see that around Halloween there was this huge skeleton, and they were super excited. And the focus here is really on that discovery on the youngest, his face there. He's like, oh, look at that skeleton, right? And so that idea I've seen in business as well. When I was working as a chief data scientist, there was a company in particular I can think of where we were, they gave us some data and they wanted us to help them identify the health of different products. This was a frozen foods company, and our software was really just visualizing data. But I was like, hey, I want to blow their minds. Okay, so I was like, we're gonna do some analyses, and and this data, by the way, had information about not only sales but where the sales took place. And there's lots of data. They were selling things at Costco. All right, so they had data about how many samples were used to share with the customers, and then how many units of their product were sold, as well as the weather and how many people came into the store. And so I was like, okay, well, yes, I've used a derivative of that data on a project for sure. I'm glad you remember that. Hey, it stuck. So anyway, I was like, I want to blow their minds. Okay, I want to give them more than what they bargained for. So I tried to incorporate all that information and say, here's what sales should have been, and here's what they were. And then we could say, here's the companies that overperformed, here's the ones that underperformed. Well, we did that, and they didn't believe it. And I found that happened a lot in my exuberance or enthusiasm to like say, hey, here's what you can, we can create a model and then make predictions. They I don't know if they even found it interesting. I think their initial reaction was, how did you do that? I'm not sure I can trust that. Okay, because these people are really familiar with their data, and for someone else to come in and say, here's what it should be, I think is a little worrisome. It's like, how can I trust you? Okay, so I really learned that idea of being a Gandalf or a Yoda is true. I couldn't just say, here's the answer. It's what I found to be effective for that particular scenario was to kind of lead them on this journey of discovery. And so we created this interactive dashboard that allowed them to see products in context of sales and number of people coming into the store and some other products, and see why. So we use the scatter plot, and then they could click on a dot and see and get more information and see why it was classified as above or below expectations. And I think that let them really kind of explore and make conclusions themselves, rather than me just saying, here are the good ones, here's the bad ones. And they could go through and say, oh yeah, I know this store is in an area that's not very well populated, or there was a flood, an unexpected flood here. And so it allowed them to really kind of discover on their own with some guidance. And I found that I saw that pattern over and over again. I couldn't just give them the solution. It was, here's some tools, here's a dashboard that you could use to explore the data, and then they could really kind of make the discovery and then choose the actions they wanted to take.
Yeah, that's excuse me. Yeah, that's I mean that's an amazing example, and I think there's some biochemistry in this as well, where if you're told something, it goes into your head, but if you keep accessing that part of those neurons, it begins to lay down a protein called myelin, and then it makes a memory, right? And so the more people interact with things, the more it becomes entrenched, and once it's sort of in your head in a way, then it becomes yours, right? As opposed to something that's out there. Yeah, I can think like, I just had an example at work recently where I used some of the tools I learned, in the program, and we were struggling with understanding some changes we made in our strategy and how that translated into to sales performance. And so we had some people that were up and down, and I did some regression analyses to look at some of the other factors, right, beyond just revenue, right? Because it's easy sometimes to say, well, more or less is good or bad, right? And then I did some multi-factor regressions looking at territory size and longevity of the employee. And what it turned out to be is we had made a strategic decision to move larger accounts to a different group, and what that created was a lot more variation in the day-to-day sales. And that sort of shift in standard deviation ended up like really impacting people's, their compensation. So I use that data to sort of illuminate a problem, and then let people discover it. And they're like, oh, okay. So that we connected a bunch of dots, and then, have been started a program to sort of, rethink, how we do that. So it was an example of where I used some of the tools in class, brought them to work, and again went through this sort of maceration process where people were interacted with it, and then they came to say, I think if I had gone in and say, hey, the comp plan stinks, right, probably wouldn't have gotten anybody to move, right? But it was through this sort of like process where your data became a tool, right, that I used to help move folks along the way. So
that's awesome. I love hearing that. Hey, you're applying these things that you learned so quickly, and I knew that because you were during the class you were applying them.
Right, and that we shop for a little help too. So
yeah. I'm sure. I think we all need to do that still, but I also like what you said. I may have to get that in writing somehow or typed out, where you said about the myelin or
right.
the memories being formed.
Exactly. Yeah. Myelin sheets get wrapped around neurons, and that's how memories form, right? So yeah, I can provide that. But I have to tell you, it's really interesting. Taking your class, right, was of interest to me because, again, growing up in sales and commercialization, I think I made a lot of decisions early, instinctual, right, and with people and some context and EQ and the use of a variety of those tools. And then as I've grown in my career, data has become more important in a verifying method to help me make better decisions and repeatable ones. And as a result of like learning about Tableau and Power BI and being able to like build a dashboard and all the things that that you in the program had showed me, out of the blue, the president of the company approached me and said, hey, do you want to run a data analytics program? Seems like you've got this thing cooked. and I think we need to become better data stewards, right, and also make better decisions as a company. And it seems like you're kind of ahead of it. So what do you think about doing that?
That's awesome. I love it. And I want to come back to that in a second. I also just want to point out that I think it is powerful in business. I've seen that it's more powerful if someone on the team is doing the analysis rather than an external consultant that comes in, because I've been that external consultant coming in and I think there's just barriers of trust that you have to. Maybe it's just me, I don't know, but I think it's the case where anyone from an external party comes in, you have to like learn how they operate and stuff versus someone internally who has some of those skills already. It's like they're familiar with the situation, the personalities, they already have that relationship of trust. So anyway, I think there's it's really powerful if like as in a world, a community, we can increase our level of data analytics a little, we'll be able to accomplish a lot more.
Yeah.
And probably more efficiently as well. You don't have to pay as much.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point. You know, I think you know, there's human on the other end of this. We're trying to help make a decision, right? And so trust becomes a really important factor, and you know how fast you can build that. You know, I think early in my career, I had an executive president that I worked for, and he said, don't be a slide jockey, right? And so like, I never really understood that, but what he really meant was, you know, just don't put up things on the graph that are on pretty slides or really cool graphs. Like what I'm looking for is somebody to guide me towards a better decision, right? And so, you know, help me interpret it. You know, you don't want to come in as the smartest guy in the room. And I think again, you know, early on with my new lightsaber that you were showing me, and I was making really cool things that people thought were impressive, but they weren't really driving changes in organizations, right? And it really became once, you know, you connected the data with the bigger story, and then, you know, again, put them in it, right? Because they're Luke Skywalker and I'm just, you know, Ben Kenobi in the desert or whatever. You know, that's your role as an expert, right? And I think that's really really important as you think about like how do you apply this towards making, you know, your organizations better.
I love it. Yeah. Now so speaking of data and moving organizations, so it sounds like you had the opportunity to step into this new role of really focusing on data. And I know you didn't. And I think it might be worthwhile for some listeners to understand why you didn't. Like, what are some things that people should consider when deciding, hey, do I really want to go on and pursue a, you know, more of a data focused emphasis in my career? And yeah, anything that you learned from that you might be able to share?
Yeah, you know, again, every journey is individualized too, right? So, you know, my circumstance might be different than the other listeners that are on here, but I think, you know, for me, when I assessed the opportunity, you know, we were really at an infancy, right? And so again, you know, I have some data skills that have stood out, but to change an organization, right? It was kind of the way I was thinking about it. How do we all become better data stewards, and then also make better decisions, and how do we scale that? And I think, you know, the scope of the position, the way it was funded, you know, with the teams and the resources that were here early, and, you know, I just, you know, I couldn't quite get to like what I wanted to do with it, wasn't matching up with what, you know, the organization needed. So I thought maybe I could serve the role from where I was, right? And maybe it's not only bring somebody else in, which we have, and you know, he's got great skills. Super excited to work with Sean. But you know, and again, now me as staying in my role as a, you know, an advocate, right? I can help him, you know, change the organization from where I'm at, right? And I think the other thing for me is, you know, maybe a little intimidated too to some degree, but like, you know, to go dive deep into, you know, tactical day-to-day stuff. It's not something I've generally done. Like I've gotten a great experience at Geese, and you know, I understand a ton, but like, you know, it took me all weekend to do the regression. I'm telling you, right? So to do that every day, you know, wasn't my forte. So it was a little different, but again, but super excited to be one of the folks that helped plant the seed, right, to move the organization in a different direction.
Well, I love that. I think that's a good, so there's this principle of making room for discovery. I think this other principle at more of an organizational level is moving hearts and minds with data. It could be that you're an advocate of someone else. It doesn't have to be you that's the data scientist or the chief person who's analyzing the data, but if as you recognize other strengths to be able to analyze it, then You know, I suspect, I don't know if this is the case, but I suspect there's a lot of teamwork that goes on there. You've got maybe one guy that does a lot of the analysis, and you might be able to help communicate to others why it's important. And
Yeah, sure. And sometimes early on, that first person really has to be player coach, right? You have to like, do the analysis and sell it up the team, and so again, I think I represented more of the one side of it and not the other. So it just wasn't the right fit for me. But, I'm really excited about where we're headed. And I think, again, tons of opportunities for folks. I think one of the things I'd like to just say is that, again, coming from, the commercial side, where data hasn't always been there. Again, you can use data in non-data functions, if that makes sense. I think everything has data today, but point being, like, you didn't have to, be STEM and in math to really become, an advocate of using data in your organization.
I love that. Yeah. So I think that could be a second principle, is that maybe rather than think, hey, I have to have all these machine learning skills to be successful, help moving hearts and minds, help make organizational change with data, but maybe in the aggregate, our organization can, maybe I'm good at communicating, Sean is good at the analysis, and someone else is good at gathering the data, or is a data architect. And so I think recognizing that, hey, it's a team effort is an important principle.
And I say one piece of feedback was, I think going through your program and the experience that I had with ETL and really these other components of data, the massaging of it, the cleaning of it, the understanding of it, like, it's time to make the donuts for a lot of times when you're doing data, because the cleansing and getting it organized is a lot of the work, right? And I think I've become a better leader, and the word was more tolerant. So, not sure what that means, but I might need to explore that. But again, understanding what goes into that, so it's not like, you don't ask for an analysis and, hey, can you have it to me tomorrow? Understanding, like, what is the scope that has to go into really understanding that, and helping team and other folks in the organization I'm working with understand what they do. So I thought that was a really cool part of the program as well.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah.
I have an analogy. This isn't necessarily data focused, but it's related. So teaching online and creating videos, you learn a lot about videography. And earlier on, I had this really patient guy, Steve Kraut, who would set up the lights, and I didn't really think much about it. Well, after having to set it up on my own, I was like, Steve, this is amazing. He's like, yeah, right. It's you have to think about how to get power to all these lights. Anyway, I think it's analogous to when you have some practice organizing data and just doing the analysis, you recognize, you appreciate what goes into it, and hopefully, yeah, it makes you more tolerant and also more effective, because you can think about, hey, maybe I can get data from other places. And anyway, I know I'm much more appreciative of videos now, and lighting. Just what goes into lighting is impressive. So
Yeah, sure. I know. I apologize. The bright background here.
Oh no, yours looks great, and I'm not an expert in that anyway. I probably couldn't critique it very well. I just
no, I'm just teasing. But yeah, no, I think that's what the MBA experience online is. Again, really, it's broad, world-class faculty, and you learn more than what's on the agenda, on the syllabus.
Awesome, thanks. Hey, I'm gonna kind of I want to share something.
Sure.
All right. Okay. So one of the principles is to make it memorable. So when we have findings with data, it's really important to make it memorable. And I think in our day and age, with all the tools we've got Power BI, Tableau, and those are just a couple. We've got many other things. We can make some really flashy graphs and visualizations that are also really interactive. Sometimes I think we can look beyond the mark, and we focus on that more than what we should. And so here's an analogy that I like using. It's related to visualization, but it's not necessarily data visualization. So we've got two comics here, okay? One on the left, one on the right. The one on the left is a Marvel comic. The one on the right is a Far Side comic. And by the way, I'm biased because I love Far Side. But you look at this, I think you can quickly get the story or the main point from the Far Side comic. Right? It's a really simple drawing there. You can see the guys don't even have pupils in there, right? It doesn't focus on a lot of the details. And then there's just a little bit of text there.
Sure.
Versus the Marvel comic, it's really impressive artwork. Okay, so they've done a lot to shade the faces, to add in some background, a lot of text in there. So two different audiences, I realize. I'm not trying to say one's better than the other, but when it comes to visualizations, I think it's worth recognizing that a lot of times we don't need fancy visualizations. We just want something that will help people remember relationships. And so I think Far Sides are really good examples of this.
Yeah.
And
I think
anyway,
great.
so
Yeah, it reminds me of a classic. I think it's a newspaper thing. Never bury the lead, right? You want to make the point, because again, if you're, I go back to my analogy again. If you're Yoda and you know how to use the Force, it's not, you don't want to show all the abilities, right? You're trying to convey a point or teach somebody something new so they can make a decision, right? So again, the simpler is better. And I've applied a bunch of those tools as well. And so my team has even commented, like, it's very easy to understand what you're trying to say, right? And so that's a compliment when it comes to communicating with data.
awesome. Yeah, great. Well, let's see. There's another principle I think that is worth focusing on and worth recognizing, and that is that we want the findings to be actionable. You hear this term actionable insight a lot. And I think as a numbers guy, sometimes I just like being able to find something that is meaningful to me, but it may not be meaningful to others, or it may not have a clear path of action that comes from that. And so I think we often have to step back and think, okay, what is the result of this analysis or these numbers? And so here's another principle that I want to share here. I think numbers should lead to individuals oftentimes, not always, but should lead to specifics. So if you think about maybe quarterly reports for a church congregation, perhaps, or a summary of grades for a class, or maybe summary of sales for a sales team, hopefully what that leads to is outreach efforts, right? You can identify those that maybe are doing really well, and hey, can you share with us what you're doing to be successful? Or to those that aren't doing as well, and hey, what can we do to help you succeed and be better? Have you had any experiences with that in your
Yeah,
life?
I mean, what strikes me is probably where I'm at today, and 60 or 80% of the patients who have sleep apnea in the United States are undiagnosed. So most people don't know they have sleep apnea, and those numbers are somewhere between 6 and 9 million people across the U.S. and maybe larger depending on the patient populations look at. But my older brother has sleep apnea, and he was a fitness athlete his whole life, played soccer, and has no cardiovascular risk factors other than he had sleep apnea, and ended up with a catheter ablation. So that's a procedure they do for people who have an irregular heartbeat. And so when I could talk about 6 million, 10 million patients, hundreds of millions of dollars that are in the healthcare system, mortality at a large level. But when you break it down for me personally, right, it becomes about part of my journey that I can really kind of relate to. And I think I have the luxury, I guess, of working with physicians. And so we often do that. We talk about, what the one person, right? And then when it's that one person, it really kind of crystallizes that. And I think that's where the hearts and minds come from, because, you can't solve 10 million people. But when I think about my brother, Brian, right, that all of a sudden becomes really, really meaningful, right? And then I think about, okay, what about, other people I know that, snore or, don't understand that, that's also it's a modifiable risk factor for cardiovascular disease, which happens to be the number one killer of patients or people in the United States. So again, really important mission, but again, big picture, it's really impactful. But if you can turn it into a one, that's again where you get people to move.
I love it. Yeah. Great example too with your brother.
Yeah, he's doing great, by the way.
Good. Good. Well, let me switch gears a little bit. Let me ask you, do you, of the data analytic tools that you've learned about, is there one that you find to be most useful for you, or one that you like the most, or
Yeah,
anyway?
I think, I started with Excel, right? And you pushed me to progress. So, like any good teacher, right? You open the door, and then I kind of ran through it. So for me, I think, at least in the organization I'm at, we use Power BI, and Tableau was one I liked, and I was, working on my own. But I think I used the Power BI tool a ton to help sort of crystallize and tell these stories. So that's one I love. Alteryx I thought was super interesting. This idea of creating, sort of a robot, right, to do some of this work. Haven't had a lot of opportunities to apply that, but was thankful for the experience in the program to get exposed to that. And then, I think R has been, is a great tool as well. I loved learning that. Frankly, I was super intimidated. I'd never coded. And through a happenstance, I ended up in like one of the advanced classes early. But I think speaking to yourself and Park and the faculty there, plus again, engaged student, I think I drove myself to learn it, and it turned out to be way easier than I thought it was going to be. And I think that really was this sort of breakout moment for me that again, I could do this, and it could be meaningful, and I got a lot of personal reward out of that. And then it just sort of relit the fire for me around becoming a better data steward.
Awesome. I
How
love
about
it.
you?
Well,
What's your favorite software?
oh, thanks for asking. Well, I want to say I think there's a place for all of these. Like Excel, I still use Excel. I don't think that's going to go away at all. It's just I call it artisanal data analysis, where you can get in and change individual cells. It's very easy to use, but it doesn't work as well for big data. So I have a strong preference towards code-based tools.
Sure.
The reason is because you can do almost anything with them. So I mean, I can't verify this for sure, but with Power BI and Tableau, you can create really beautiful visualizations and do it really quickly. Well, there's actually packages in R that allow you to convert it to a drag and drop type of visualization creation tool. Yeah. So you can, now it's not as, it doesn't have as many bells and whistles as Power BI and Tableau, but you can do something very similar to Power BI and Tableau with it. And it's free, it's open source. Python and R are open source, whereas like Alteryx, so what R and Power BI don't do, Alteryx does.
Right.
And that is, with Alteryx, you create just this diagram of a workflow that actually does it. You don't, I mean, it's like a visual way, it's like visual coding. Sometimes my children will do that, and it's kind of the same thing. And so it's really easy to see the workflow. That is not the case with code languages, because you have to read through this dense code and organize it well. So Alteryx, I guess they can't do that, but Alteryx is very expensive, at least from what I've heard. So anyway, that's a nice thing about R and R and Python, is that you can do almost anything that these other tools can do, and it's free. Oh, and then the other thing is that like sometimes it seems like you always get to the point where with Power BI and Tableau and even Alteryx, there's not a drag and drop feature, so you have to learn some language that they have. In Power BI, it's called DAX. And so you have to start learning a language anyway. And it's like, well, okay, if I'm going to start learning a language, I'm just going to do something that's free and that can do everything, almost everything. And so I like R or Python for those reasons. There is definitely an upfront cost to those. You have to learn how to do that. But anyway, that's why I like it. And those code-based languages, at least.
Yeah, that's great. I was just going to say one sort of, I don't know, practical point is like, if you're going to begin a data journey, or you want to become a champion of that in the organization, find tools that are already in-house, right? If you have them, instead of trying to like going through finance and adding another system, right? Try to use the tools you have, right? And I think that's what, you your program has really inspired in me is that there's a variety of ways to go after this, right? Find the ones that you have access to. Don't let the tools get in the way. And I would say, again, sorry, I'm kind of going off here, but my son ended up in college in computer science, and so in a way, I want to thank you, right? And so the ability to get me comfortable with coding has created a connection to my son and his journey through what he wants to do, and we talk about coding. Of course, he's already way more advanced than I am, but at least I'm in the conversation with an 18-and-a-half-year-old, so that's very cool.
Well, that's awesome. I'm happy to hear that. You're too kind. I think you would have done that anyway, but I appreciate the kind comments there. Yeah, I love the idea of using what tools you have. I have an experience. So when I was a chief data scientist, we worked with a large computer manufacturer. I've shared this with you, so you know this, but for the audience, they had a logistics team and they were operating with Excel, which is great. So they wanted to reduce the amount of time they spent creating reports. And so they brought us in as an external party, and our software was really visualization focused, I would say. Well, we tried, and we even thought about rewriting some of the software, not me personally, but the leadership team and the developers, so that it could fit into this particular use case, because this could be a big customer. Well, decided not to. And what we ended up doing was since they were already using Excel, we just went in and used the Visual Basic for applications, the code in Excel. So Excel has this coding backend that you can use to automate things. We wrote a custom macro for them in Excel, and they were really happy with it and paid us handsomely for it. And if they, and I'm really happy, and it made me look good, and I learned a lot from it. But I thought to myself, if they just had one person, I wasn't like an expert in VBA, but I had enough knowledge that I could go in and kind of figure out how things worked. And if they had one person on their team that could have done that, they probably could have saved a lot of money. That one person probably would have been a hero, in-house, and would have looked really good. And you didn't have to get any new tools. So anyway, I think there's a lot to say about learning something about a language in our day and age when there's so much software development and
yeah, it's everywhere.
Yeah,
I think the fridge tells you when to order milk these days, right? It's software everywhere you go, and so you'll be able to connect that and pull it together was a big part of the digital marketing programs, the specialization I worked with as well. Hey, just a question. So interesting about your journey, right? And so you were in academics, then you sort of went into to practice, right? And then now you're back in academics. So maybe share a few thoughts about that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So yeah, I was trained in accounting and got a PhD in accounting from the University of Iowa. And you might wonder, what is there more to learn about accounting? Is there a third debits, credits, and some other thing, But no, what you do is you really study how accounting information influences decisions, whether that's at a market level, at a firm-based level. That's kind of, if I could stereotype it simply, that's what it'd be. So you learn a lot of data analytic techniques. And so I have always liked the analysis part more than the writing of academic papers. It's kind of like Top Golf. If you've been to Top Golf, it's like you get to drive the balls as far as you want. You don't have to worry about putting. And so for me, like the Top Golf of academics is the data analytics. It's, I just like finding ways to analyze the data. So anyway, I had this opportunity to join this business intelligence company, and I joined it, and I learned so much more about data analytics, getting into problems that were broader than the ones that I had been studying for accounting research. And I also learned about the importance of bringing in data from external sources. So the broader pipeline, bringing in data, and then also sharing it with others and automating that process. And I just loved that. And so I had a real hoot, I guess, working as a chief data scientist and chief data officer. And I realized, though, that there were things that I would spend time doing, like connecting to APIs or cleansing data. And I wouldn't do that. I'd do it for a little bit of time, then it'd be a year before I'd come back and need to do that again. And I wouldn't remember exactly how I did it. It's like, I know I did this and I figured it out, but I have to go back and look it up. And I thought, well, you know what? I should just start making videos and putting them on YouTube so that for myself, if no one else, I can go and remind myself how to do this. Well, around that time, I had the opportunity to work with Geese. There's this opening in the University of Illinois, the Geese College of Business, and boy, I can tell you, and all right, this may sound too much like a commercial, but I really like Geese and the University of Illinois. Before I joined, oftentimes there was someone who like really stood out in the academic community, and they stood out to me either because they were great researchers or they were just a nice person. And I was inspired by good people. Okay, so oftentimes those people were connected to Illinois somehow as a student or as a faculty member. And so when this opportunity came up, and I always thought to myself, boy, if that ever comes, that'd be a real honor to work there. So anyway, that opportunity came, like, oh, how can I pass this up? And I have an affinity for teaching. I just love being able to, I guess, help others if I can, to the extent I can. Some I don't help probably, but anyway, that opportunity came up, and it was just a blending of a lot of things I enjoyed teaching, data analytics, and even videography. I don't know if I've told you this, but in high school, in my first semester in college, I took like a video production course. And so I've been interested in it for a long time. I'm not doing anything like super special effects now, but being able to have a part in creating videos that we use on Coursera or even online, those are things that I've all liked. So this is like a dream for me to be able to be teaching data analytics and doing some video skills as well. So,
oh, wow, great. So how is it like to teach, students these classes online? Is that
it's
experience?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. I'll answer this, and then we should probably end and see if there's any questions here. But there's pros and cons. So I'll start with the disadvantage. I think there's more advantages for me. It works out well, but the disadvantage is you don't get to have that physical interaction with people and share the same space and have the chats in the hallway, the small talk, right? I don't think we do that as much with video. But the benefit is, especially with data analytics, if you're online and participating in an online course, you have access to a computer. And so you can analyze data alongside with me. Whereas in a classroom, I think it's, I haven't really experienced that, but I think it just lends itself well, and I can share my screen easy and walk people through it. So at least for data analytics, what I'm doing now, it's really great for sharing a process and teaching those data analytics skills.
Wow,
so.
That's great. Yeah, it's interesting. I had one observation when I first started thinking about, okay, as a student, how is that experience going to be? And you guys have a global reach, and so I've interacted with students all over the world, and the workplace, the social media is really rich and super engaging. There's study groups, and there's a lot of really interesting, surprising. I was pleasantly surprised by the interaction I've had, and sort of again being a commercial leader, physical sort of, the touch, the feel kind of approach. I've been able to sort of probably gain more through this online program by having reach that's I can interact with lots of people, even on a one-on-one basis, but all over the world. And I probably would have never had that had I chosen a different program.
I love it. And just one other thing to tag on to that, I love like being able to see into homes. Like right now, I can see a little bit. You learn more about people that you wouldn't learn if you were in the same physical space. And you probably heard my son a few minutes ago as well. So you learn these things about people. It just makes them more real in some ways, even though it's just virtual.
Sure, so. Absolutely. Well, good. Is there questions? I can't remember if we're doing. Is there live interaction?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you both so much for this wonderful conversation, very informative conversation. We really enjoyed it. We did receive a couple of questions in the meantime. So since we have a couple of minutes, I'll just get on it. So the first question says, how important is domain knowledge in becoming an effective communicator, translating data into a compelling story?
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, can I take that? I meant to mention that earlier. I think that's what's, when you spoke about trust and getting people to believe, to take action, having domain knowledge is the differentiator, right? It's that, you know, I have some expertise, whether it's, you know, in my sales organization or in my space, right? And I'm bringing the data, and so it makes it much more believable. And often, again, you know, the regression numbers or the those pieces of insight you get when you connect them to that, that's what really is powerful, and it powers decisions. So I think it's really critical. I think that's, you know, one of the reasons I had maybe an opportunity to sort of, you know, build a data program at our organization, because I had a ton of domain knowledge, and I had interest in the data analytics, and so they were betting on, you know, me, you know, taking my insight and then be able to sort of develop it with data, as opposed to the other way, where you bring in somebody who knows all kinds of software tools and coding, but doesn't understand how the business actually operates, right? Sometimes, you know, that can be a mess.
Yeah, I would agree. I think domain knowledge, at least for moving hearts and minds, trumps technical skills, because if you don't know how those numbers are influential, or even what numbers to analyze in the first place, you're not going to come up with insight that will lead to change or improvement.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question says, do you have an example of where your data analytics acumen gave you a competitive advantage?
Oh, that's a good one. Where competitive advantage. Yeah, Ron, why don't you take that while I think?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think just being able to prescribe courses of action to take is really useful. So let me just take it to a personal level here, and you could probably relate this to an organizational level. But so with investing, making investments, if you have, so I have a personal system set up on my home computer that goes and gets information about daily stock prices, analyzes it, makes forecasts about the likelihood of the stock price increasing by 2% over the next few days or decreasing, and then makes investments by executing trades based on that without me being involved. What that does is it automates a process that is very labor intensive if I were doing that by hand, and it frees me up to then focus on other things. So I think it's still yet to be determined if I am more successful than just investing in an index fund. I'm kind of doing this because it's just fun for me, but I think that example though, and I guess that really highlights being able to automate things, but also taking some knowledge and infusing that into a process just frees up more time, gives me an advantage of having more time to focus on other things.
Yeah.
Could be an example.
That's a good one. I think of one opportunity with a customer where, again, healthcare, there's a lot of big data sets around from that are de-anonymized based on, you know, Medicare data and where procedures are, and so you can kind of generally figure out what's happening inside a hospital. And so I can think of one particular situation where I was presenting to an executive at a service line, where I had done some analysis around the area we were in, and I had some insight about their program that they didn't have, right? And so I had pulled some data and looked at some you know, charge data versus the procedures they were doing, and I was actually able to sort of have an insight that that particular customer didn't have. And so when I presented it, it was like the light bulbs went off. They're, you know, and again, they had sort of felt this and couldn't quite figure out the problem, and I was able to do that. And so, you know, that turned into a pretty big win for the organization. And, you know, when you make those connections, they last the test of time. So again, competitive pressure comes in, people want to, you know, save a few dollars to do something different, but people reflect back to like, who helped me? And you know, a lot of partnership there. And then I'd say internally, a couple times where I've presented to executive teams, you know, again, you go in a big room with the big deck and you have your you know, your process or your AOP, your annual plan for next year, and you're pitching for headcount. And again, to be able to tell that story, but then also back it up with data. When you're presenting to a large room, there's going to be analytical people in there, and so making sure that you had the numbers tied off really well can help me in one particular situation where I was able to actually get funding in a pretty tough environment, because I was able to sort of tell the big story, and I grabbed that half of the room, and then I was able to sort of drill down into the points, and I had them nailed, and that gave me credibility, and then so they made it, it was easy for them to say yes, and so I de-risked the whole thing. So I can think of those are sort of two examples of competitives, or where I've won competitively using data.
Thank you so much. And we have one last feedback follow-up with a question. Love the concept of taking the client on the journey of discovery. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to explain the math? And do you have any suggestions for doing that?
We had to explain the math. Yeah, go ahead, Ron. I'll let you.
Right. So the only, well, actually, even in the IMBA curriculum, I haven't explained the math. Just because we don't have time. Like MBA students don't have time necessarily to go deep down into the statistics. So I guess we do a little math, but I would say even there, we don't get into real deep math. So I haven't needed to, but I think that would, so it's more just conceptual. That's what I've needed to explain is the concept. Here's what's happening with the regression or extreme gradient boosting. But I think it would be different if I were working with other data scientists. And I guess I have had that. When I've worked as a team with other people who are also pretty technically inclined and have good statistical background skills, yeah, then we'll start talking math. Otherwise, really stay away from it, because that tends to shut people down. It's just not a common ground for talking about things for the most part, in my experience.
Yeah, I'd say two things I learned. One, write all of your assumptions. And so one of the things about the coding, being in coding versus other languages, you can kind of little hashtag yourself out. And so you write a note to yourself, like, this is what I was doing here, right? And so if you have to come back to reference it, makes it easier to sort of do that. And then two, just from a sales perspective, understand who you're talking to, right? So, think ahead of time, like how deep you need to go, and just be prepared. A lot of cases, standard deviation is fine, right? But if they want to really drive into the, into the numbers, then, just prepare that ahead of time. Don't try to wing it, would be, I guess, my advice there.
Perfect. Well, once again, thanks so much, Professor Guymon, Mr. Elniski, for this wonderful conversation. We truly appreciate the opportunity to have you present for the IVY Exec audience. Thank you so much, Kate, for that wonderful introduction. And I would like to thank you all for joining us today. As previously mentioned, we'll make sure to share the recording of the webinar in the coming days, so you can look forward to receiving your copy. And I would just like to wish you all a great rest of the day, and stay safe. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Alexander. Thanks, Michael.
Bye. Thanks.